I'll be honest, I don't remember if it was a thing in 1 and 2. I just remember New Vegas.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect.
Howdy, partner.
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Also, how the f is he supposed to... Oh, right, Bethesda.
By the way, I'm still getting plenty of comments telling me my video aged poorly. Either I live rent-free in the heads of many people, and I've upset them enough for them to want to go out of their way to come to my video and give me engagement telling me I'm wrong, or someone somewhere thinks I'm important enough to warrant sending bots after me. Fucking hell, man.
This is so stupid.
I would sacrifice New Vegas in a heartbeat if it meant Bethesda didn't have free reign to butcher this franchise as they have for the last 15 years.
No, you wouldn't. Shut up, nerd. Hello friends, and welcome newcomers. My name is Netherless, and today we're watching a video that is a complete and utter abortion of a critique/rant about the Fallout TV show. Now, the channel behind this video is Creetosis, and the video is titled The Worst Retcons of the Fallout TV Show. Now that is quite the title, friend, because I sure as hell don't know what he's even talking about with a title like that. So, you know, I'm quite curious to see what he means by the show apparently having retcons. This video came out a couple months ago, and I would have responded to it much earlier were it not for certain circumstances. But, you know, better late than never. Before I start responding to this guy's video, if you have not seen the Fallout TV show yet, you will be greeted with spoilers upon watching this video, so if you don't want to be spoiled, click off now. Otherwise, we're gonna go ahead and get right into this dumpster fire of a video. This is probably gonna be a long one, so buckle up, friends. You'll be in for quite the ride.
The Fallout Amazon series has finally arrived, and it has done more damage to the lore and world of Fallout than I could have possibly imagined.
Ooh, a lot of damage to the world and lore of Fallout? That's quite the claim there. I'm quite curious to see what exactly broke the wonderful world of Fallout.
There's been a lot of cope going around about this, trying to defend the show.
I'm sorry, I know we just started, but buddy, come on. You are the last person to ever talk shit about people coping when you legit got mad at the fact that the show has been praised by a lot of people in one of your videos. You even went as far as to make a tinfoil hat theory that someone sent a lot of bots after you over this show.
See, these people are basing their comments off of some positive critic reviews from the Access media, because as we all know, She-Hulk, Rings of Power, and The Last Jedi weren't bad at all.
Yeah, you want to know the difference between Rings of Power, Last Jedi, She-Hulk, and Fallout? Fallout actually got positive reviews off the audience. Like, I don't know, man, that sounds like a cope argument to me.
By the way, I'm still getting plenty of comments telling me my video aged poorly. Either I live rent-free in the heads of many people, and I've upset them enough for them to want to go out of their way to come to my video and give me engagement telling me I'm wrong, or someone somewhere thinks I'm important enough to warrant sending bots after me.
Yeah guys, if you just so happen to disagree with Creetosis and you think his preconceived notion that the show is gonna be bad aged like milk, you're either a mindless bot or Creetosis is living rent-free in your heads. Like, Jesus Christ, you're talking about people coping while defending the show. You are like the prime example of someone that copes on a daily basis. Anyways, that's enough shit talk. Let's see what Creetosis actually has to say in regards to the show retconning the games.
But it absolutely 100% retcons the games, including New Vegas. The first cope is to show this particular frame from the final episode, showing that the city of Vegas still exists. That was never in question. Retconning New Vegas doesn't mean the city of Vegas is entirely erased from the timeline. Retconning New Vegas means undoing or ruining the stories, factions, characters, and significant events that take place during the game, or otherwise contradicting established lore.
First of all, you can't undo a story when it's being told in future events. We don't even know what's going on within places like New Vegas or what's happened to most of the other important characters in that story. Most of the stuff we've seen in regards to things like New Vegas and Shady Sands have taken place after the events of Fallout 4. That's not a retcon, that's just a change you don't like. As for contradicting lore, well, we'll get to that in a second.
To start off, let's look at two characters really quickly, Mr. House and Frederick Sinclair. In New Vegas, House is portrayed as an altruist. His goal is the continuation of the human species, including getting humanity into space and colonizing other planets.
Give me 20 years and I'll reignite the high technology development sectors. 50 years and I'll have people in orbit. 100 years and my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation.
This show turns this line into a lie, which is a retcon. Rather than being something he genuinely wants, it's now a lie that he's selling you, because this does not align with his portrayal in the show.
Okay, I really didn't think I would have to point this out to a diehard New Vegas fan of all people, but you somehow missed the point of Mr. House's character entirely. Mr. House is not an altruist in the slightest. He is a multi-billionaire, smooth-talking businessman that wants to achieve his own goals. You cannot sit there and tell me that Mr. House was telling the absolute truth to a completely random courier in New Vegas. Saying that this is a retcon is stupid, because you don't know Mr. House's ulterior motives behind the scenes, so if anything, it makes a lot of sense that Mr. House was portrayed the way he was in the TV show.
This isn't a one-off thing either. He repeatedly mentions saving mankind.
What I'm offering you is a ground floor opportunity in the most important enterprise on Earth. What I'm offering is a future. For you, and for what remains of the human race. You have a very bright future ahead of you. Thanks to your actions today, so does the rest of mankind.
Here's the thing about Mr. House. He's obviously a visionary of sorts, but he's not an altruist. When he says things like, "You have a bright future ahead of you," or "This is for the betterment of mankind," that's him smooth-talking you. He doesn't really care what happens to you so long as Mr. House gets what he wants, because Mr. House cares about New Vegas, not the whole wide world.
During a Vault-Tec meeting, they propose the idea to House and the other CEOs that are there that they can win the game of capitalism by nuking the entire planet to destroy the competition, which is such an absurdly stupid and nonsense concept that I have to resist breaking it down here. But when hearing this plan, House says this.
It's a fun idea. There's a lot of earning potential with the end of the world. But we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical. How can you guarantee results?
There's the implication that he's on board with this plan, but worse yet, it's established that he knows this is Vault-Tec's plan. So if he knows Vault-Tec is behind the bombs, then why does he say this in New Vegas?
By 2065, I deemed it a mathematical certainty that an atomic war would devastate the Earth within 15 years. Every projection I ran confirmed it. I knew I couldn't save the world, nor did I care to, but I could save Vegas, and in the process, perhaps save mankind. I set to work immediately. I thought I had plenty of time to prepare. As it turned out, I was 20 hours short.
Yeah, he says all of that in the meeting because he means business. It makes sense that Mr. House would want to side with Vault-Tec if he predicted that the bombs were going to be dropped and wanted to profit off of it. Oh, and for a little funny, he also let this little bit of dialogue slip by, where he says, "I knew I couldn't save the world, nor did I care to." Yeah, Mr. House is definitely an altruist, my guy.
There's no way in hell he'd talk about calculating the bombs dropping to within 20 hours of it actually happening if he knew Vault-Tec was behind it, nor would he have a system in place to protect the area from nuclear devastation if he were in on it. And again, if the way around this is that he's simply lying to you in New Vegas, then that's still a retcon, because it wasn't a lie originally.
You don't know that Mr. House wasn't lying. You are literally just taking what he said at face value and are completely unaware that he may have ulterior motives. Bro, imagine if it's revealed in another Fallout game that Mr. House lied to you. Creetosis would be the type of guy to still call that a retcon.
It would be a retcon because this show is recontextualizing a line that was taken to be true at face value and turning it into a lie.
Again, that is not a retcon. You are just assuming that what he's saying is true when you don't know that he has ulterior motives.
Moving on to Sinclair, there's less to say because he's a smaller character, but through Dead Money we learn that the Sierra Madre Casino and Resort is essentially a love letter to a singer and actress, Vera Keys. The whole project is extremely important to him, and if he were the CEO or even representative of the Big MT, there's no way in hell he would allow this place to be used as a testing ground. If anything, Sinclair himself is a victim of the Big MT and its unethical experiments.
I'm sorry, Sinclair is a victim of Big MT because of the experiments they made? Don't you know that Sinclair literally funded them to do that? The Big MT were one of his many companies. How is he a victim? Big MT is also associated with Vault-Tec, so it also makes sense that Sinclair was at that meeting. Considering the fact that Frederick Sinclair is the guy that set up traps for the sake of setting up traps, because he was obsessed with security measures, and he funded the Big MT, it's not outside the realm of possibility that Sinclair would allow the Sierra Madre to be used as a testing ground. And wouldn't you know it, he did allow it to be a testing ground, because that's how the Ghost People came to be, something that Sinclair and Big MT were involved in. Literally verbatim in the wiki, Sinclair gave them free reign to use the Sierra Madre as a giant testing ground for experimental technologies. Now, unbeknownst to Sinclair, some incidents did happen within these testing grounds, and the people that worked there were unknowingly just used as test subjects. However, that doesn't mean Sinclair didn't allow this to happen, and it doesn't mean he wouldn't suggest some sort of experiment like he did in the TV show. The ends justify the means. He didn't care what was going on behind the scenes, he only cared about getting what he wanted.
But as I'll talk about later, the point of this show is capitalism bad. So now he's a generic fat cat CEO, who is giddy about the idea of tormenting people in vaults for no reason.
We could intentionally overcrowd a vault so people have to compete to survive inside it.
Dude, he literally used his workers in the Sierra Madre as fucking test subjects, and you're shocked that Sinclair would be on board of experimenting with the vaults. You can't be this dense. The fact you're also going extremist mode over the capitalism bad trope in this show is really funny, especially because, well, it's Fallout. The whole reason why the bombs dropped in the Fallout was because of the war over resources, which is why the battle in Anchorage happened. It was a war between capitalists and communists. So, where's the problem?
Now, much of the controversy regarding retcons with this show arises from this particular image. A chalkboard showing a timeline of major events in the history of Shady Sands, from its founding to its destruction. In particular, the last two events on the timeline are what is in contention here. The fall of Shady Sands is listed as being in 2277, and next to it an arrow pointing to a nuclear explosion. The main defense I've seen for this is that the nuke clearly happened till later in the timeline, as there's an arrow pointing to the nuke. This is often coupled with a cheap insult that you can't read timelines.
Just for more context, Todd Howard literally came forward and confirmed that the nuke happened after the fall of Shady Sands. Now with that in mind, let's continue Cree's response.
While ignoring all other arguments and evidence, including the fact that the nuke itself does not have a date, an arrow doesn't exclusively mean later in the timeline, as it could just as easily be pointing to what caused the fall of Shady Sands. This is the only arrow used on the entire timeline, and none of the other events have one, and ignoring both the definition of fall, as well as historical context in which the fall of something is referenced as having a specific date, such as the fall of Constantinople, which fell on May 29th, 1453. Let's go over these arguments really quickly. First of all, yes, an arrow could easily be pointing to the cause of the fall. It is a totally normal and reasonable read on this image to be that the fall of Shady Sands is due to the nuke, especially considering it is entirely lacking a date.
If the arrow was pointing to the cause of the fall of Shady Sands, that would be an inconsistency, because 2277 is before the events of New Vegas' story. However, Todd Howard came out and said that the nuke happened after the fall of Shady Sands, which means the fall must be referring to something else entirely, like a decline. A fall of something doesn't mean it immediately fell. A fall takes time. It doesn't just immediately happen.
In fact, to the argument in particular that you just can't read a timeline, Most timelines don't look like this. Looking up various timelines online, there are plenty of examples of timelines where either each point has an arrow to the next point, or it ends with an arrow pointing to the implied future, but I couldn't find a single example of a timeline where the entire timeline lacks an arrow, except between the two final events on the timeline.
Okay, buddy, this is just a game of semantics at that point. A timeline can look like a whole myriad of things. It's not rocket science. It's literally just like any other timeline. It goes from one point to another, and it's no different from the fall of Shady Sands to the nuke. It has an arrow pointing to the right, meaning it is advancing further into the timeline, which means the nuke happened afterwards. The arrow pointing to the nuke pretty much means that everything happening after this point is inconsequential. If the nuke doesn't have a date on it, why wouldn't they put a date on it if it was the fall?
Both the lack of a date and the added arrow implies it's part of the same event, and not in the future, and it is especially weird that a vault full of survivors from Shady Sands, they're in a weird blood cult and spread the ashes of the dead on themselves in a bizarre ritual, would fail to put a date on what is arguably the most significant event in their entire lives.
No, an added arrow pointing in the right direction of the timeline means that it takes place after said event. If an arrow wasn't there and the nuke was off the line, you would have an argument, but the arrow obviously means that it is pointing to something that happened afterwards, not that it was the same event. Now, could they have added a date to the nuke? Sure, no harm in doing that, but ignoring the arrow or otherwise misinterpreting it as it happened in the same event is pretty fucking stupid.
More importantly is the Cope argument that the fall of Shady Sands doesn't mean the fall of Shady Sands. I too use words to mean things they don't actually mean. The Fallout show is a subaquatic piece of media.
How is that a Cope argument? It kinda makes sense that someone would claim that the fall of Shady Sands doesn't mean it fell immediately. A fall always takes place in a period of time. You pointed out the fall of Constantinople earlier, that lasted for almost 2 months, but a fall can last a lot longer than that, like the fall of Rome, which lasted for 2.5 centuries. Plus, if the fall of Shady Sands was in 2277, and according to Todd Howard, the nuke was dropped after the events of New Vegas, then that means the nuke must have been dropped at least 4 or 5 years later. Like, I'll concede that maybe the nuke should have had a date on it, but again, why would the arrow in the timeline point to the cause when that would be an inconsistency in the actual lore?
People are claiming the fall simply means the city was in decline at the time, but that's not what the fall of something means. Fall is the endpoint. The fall is the destruction or capture of the city by enemy forces.
You're really just gonna gloss over the other definition of a fall, which is literally what you're trying to argue against, and it has synonyms that match the argument you're trying to refute?
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Yes, a fall can mean a place is declining, because a fall doesn't immediately happen. Literally in the definition that you glossed over, the fall of Rome is the example being given, and that lasted for 2.5 centuries. By the time an empire like Rome was conquered, that's when it's considered to be fallen. But before an empire has fallen, there has to be a fall of something, which always takes place in a period of time. I don't understand how you can cope this much about a timeline.
Economic or political decline is not a fall.
I'm sorry, what? What do you mean economic or political declines are not falls? Do you know about the Great Depression? You know how much negative impact the assassination of Abraham Lincoln had? The fuck do you mean something can't fall economically or politically? Yes, it can. If you were speaking past tense, like just because these happen it doesn't mean the place has fallen, it would make more sense, but to say that those don't count as falls is absolutely moronic.
Ignoring the historical use of the word fall, as well as its definition in order to play damage control for $2 billion companies, because you don't want the thing you like to face criticism for being poorly written, is just insanity. It strikes me as weird that people just cannot admit that there might be any mistakes with this show.
My guy, you are literally claiming that a place cannot fall economically or politically when it is actually possible. You are playing a game of semantics on what a fall means over a fucking chalkboard timeline in a TV show. You are much more of a sad individual than the people supposedly defending $2 billion companies. Not to mention, like I brought up earlier, you're not the biggest fan of receiving criticism either, because you immediately resort to anyone defending the show as just coping, and would paint them as mindless bots as well if they don't agree with your points.
Now from that alone, I feel a pretty strong argument has been made that the show more than reasonably portrays it as though Shady Sands was destroyed in 2277.
Damn, I think you're proving everybody right that you really can't read a timeline, because that big white shiny arrow in between the fall and the nuke says otherwise.
Because of the massive amount of criticism this received from fans of the games, Todd Howard had to come out and do damage control, claiming that New Vegas is still canon, and that they're threading the needle on this, and they're paying close attention to the timeline.
You serious?
So let me get this straight. When Todd Howard himself comes forward to clarify that the nuke happened after the events of New Vegas and not in 2277, which would arguably be a much bigger inconsistency with the actual timeline, you immediately resort to calling him out for committing damage control? If Todd Howard confirmed that the nuke happened in 2277, you would call him out for breaking the lore of Fallout, right? But because that isn't the case, you're calling him out for damage control. Like, can Todd Howard just not win? Everything he does is automatically a problem. Like, we're not talking about video games here. We're talking about a TV show that he took part in, something that was actually written very well for once, and yet these retards keep trying to search for problems to massively cope about. Like, how sad do you have to be?
Now I'll talk about Bethesda's track record with Fallout as a whole a little later.
Yeah guys, Bethesda has a track record. Don't let the actually well-written Fallout TV show distract you from the fact that Bethesda has made some horrible decisions with their games in the past and ripped apart your wallets for every last penny. Like, Jesus Christ, this is a TV show. Calm your man tits.
But it was worth bringing up this instance of damage control, because the show outright tells us and shows us numerous times that Shady Sands was nuked in 2277.
No, it doesn't. Like, bro, how do you see this timeline and hinge on that arrow and somehow still misinterpret the point of it? No, Shady Sands was not nuked in 2277. Even I never thought that it was nuked in 2277 when I looked at the timeline. You're actually just dumb.
So first off, the fact that Rose, Lucy's mother, is a ghoul and was in Shady Sands when it was nuked means that she's directly tied to the destruction of the city by being there when it happened.
No shit.
In episode 4, Lucy mentions the Plague of 77, in which people starved, her mother included.
In the Great Plague of 77, everyone had to quarantine. They couldn't work the farms together. People starved, my mother included.
This is the show outright telling us that Lucy's mother died in 2277. Now we know that isn't true as Rose is a ghoul, but Hank doesn't know that when he tells young child Lucy that her mother died.
You're assuming quite a lot here. You don't know that Hank wouldn't know about the mother's condition when it was established in the final episode that Hank was a liar. The Great Plague of 77 is something that Hank told Lucy. It's something that Lucy believes what actually happened, but the big reveal in episode 8 is that Hank is a liar. That's the point of the ghoul being revealed as Lucy's mother. Hank was the one that nuked Shady Sands, the place where her mother was, and also the place where Maximus was as a child. So the whole point of Lucy talking about the Great Plague of 77, along with a few other things in the plot, was to build up the twist at the end that Hank was the one behind it all.
Maybe Hank didn't nuke Shady Sands right away. Maybe he waited a few years before doing it. But why though? Based on what we know, there's no reason for him to arbitrarily wait. Worse yet, if he did wait 4 years for no particular reason, then we now need to explain why Rose doesn't go back to the vault to get her children back. We know she can do this because Moldaver uses Rose's Pip-Boy to get into Vault 32. She found a functioning surface city that is very safe, and an entire society and growing nation to be a part of. Why the fuck would she abandon her children to Hank and a life in the vault when she knows something shady is going on there?
First of all, Rose did not abandon her children. Hank went after Rose to get Lucy. It was established as such in the show. Lucy remembers when she was with her mother that she was out on an open field, not inside the virtual field that the vault has. It was from that point that Hank took Lucy from Rose before the nuke on Shady Sands happened. Nuking Shady Sands should have an obvious reason on why. If we decide to humor the question of why Hank would wait a few years to nuke Shady Sands is the heart and symbol of the NCR. If Hank would find out that a place like Shady Sands was being rebuilt and rehabilitated by people after it was suffering a fall, that's competition for Vault Tech. So no shit, Hank is going to nuke Shady Sands because the NCR is Vault Tech's competition.
Further, in the end credits of episode 5, it starts on this frame. showing the checkout stamps on a library book in a school locker in Shady Sands, where the last date on the book is 76. Now it is just an end credit sequence, so maybe that shouldn't be strong evidence, right? Well, riddle me this, Batman. Why would they intentionally put incorrect info into their own show and place so much emphasis on it as to start the entire end credit sequence on this frame?
How is that incorrect information? All that end credits shot really shows is that the people stopped writing on the whiteboard at that time, because that's when the fall started happening. We know that Shady Sands still existed at that point because of Lucy's father being the one to nuke it after the fact. You know that whiteboard wouldn't exist if the nuke actually happened in 2277, right? The city is literally a crater. That whiteboard would be non-existent. Now, even with this being said, while I think it's completely unnecessary to hinge on this small detail in the end credits scene, I will say this. It may be a logical inconsistency on behalf of the writers, depicting it as the downfall of Shady Sands instead of when it got nuked, but that would just be taking it as confirmation bias from a theory based on a chalkboard timeline that has the community split already on what it means, even with Todd Howard further clarifying in the future. We can offer up theories on either side, so at the end of the day, this is one people should think more for themselves about, rather than just listening to what the YouTubers say.
Further still, characters talking about Shady Sands act as though it is the whole of the NCR. While it is referenced as the first capital, Maximus tells Lucy that society being rebuilt in the form of the NCR didn't work out, because Shady Sands got nuked.
You never heard of the New California Republic?
What about Reclamation Day? The entire purpose of my vault was to come up to the surface one day and restart civilization. It's Reclamation Day. It's what keeps us all going, and it already happened without us.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, it didn't work out.
Maximus wasn't referring to the NCR at that moment. He asked if Lucy knew about the NCR, then Lucy went on a tangent about Reclamation Day where a society rebuilds, and in response to that, Maximus said that it didn't work out, in reference to Shady Sands getting nuked. Just because Shady Sands got nuked doesn't mean the NCR doesn't exist anymore, because that's not what Maximus meant.
None of the NCR remnants nor the members in the vault know it was Vault Tech that nuked Shady Sands, despite the fact that they all either follow or literally worship Moldaver, and she knows that Vault Tech was behind it. Why the fuck wouldn't she tell them, besides to save the reveal for the audience?
You say this as if Moldaver supposedly knows about the existence of this particular vault and the fact they worship her. It was never established in the show that she knows of this vault, otherwise I don't think those vault dwellers would still be there if she would have told them about Hank's plan.
There's also the whole lack of any NCR presence in the show, except the cultists in the vault and Moldaver's remnants, the latter of which are wiped out by the end.
No, the people in Vault 4 are just the survivors of Shady Sands. Wording it as if they were part of the NCR is finicky because it's mostly referred to the military force. Those are just civilians from Shady Sands that happen to worship Moldaver.
Before the show released, not a single person on Earth thought that Shady Sands was no longer the capital or anything of the sort. These kinds of arguments trying to justify this retcon is some of the biggest and most pathetic cope you will ever see. This is especially funny given the fact that in New Vegas, during a quest, you're given a quiz to gain access to NCR supplies meant only for NCR citizens, and one of the questions is asking what is the capital of the NCR, to which the correct answer is obviously Shady Sands.
Okay, second question. What was the original name of the NCR capital? Aradesh, Shady Sands, the Boneyard, or Vault 13? Right. Good. You passed with flying colors. I told you it'd be fine.
Notice that he didn't say the original capital or the former capital. He asked what was the original name of the capital, which means this whole former capital nonsense is nothing more than bad writing from the showrunners, as a way to claim the capital of the NCR hasn't been destroyed because Shady Sands isn't the capital anymore, even though there's plenty of evidence against this.
I mean, why else would they ask for the original name of the capital? The original name of the capital could go both ways, and if anything, it could actually place more emphasis on there being another capital and Shady Sands being the former. What you're doing is just playing a game of semantics at this point.
Fuck your worthless cope arguments, stop defending garbage. If you enjoy it, fine, whatever, I don't care.
Dude, this could literally go back towards you. You've been doing nothing but coping and malding over this show and the people that like it. You clearly care that people enjoy the show and are willing to defend it. Otherwise, this video wouldn't be this antagonistic. What you've been listing in this entire video are not retcons, nor is it proof that the show was poorly written. You literally came into this show with the preconceived notion that it was going to be bad. You're the one that was planning on going into the show with bad faith.
Don't act like this shit is good, and don't try to run interference for the show, or gaslight anyone else who is critical of this shit for being terribly written and retconning the games when it very obviously does. There's also the insane coincidence to contend with, that Shady Sands just kinda independently fell, the quote being that fall means decline and not fall, the same year Lucy's mother left the vault. Hank took the kids back and told them the mother was dead. If he delayed for several years in moving to town, we now also have to assume that Hank told them she was dead, despite knowing full well she was alive, and might possibly return for them. It only makes sense for him to tell his children she's dead, if he actually thinks she is, due to nuking the city she's living in. Every piece of evidence within the show points to the nuke being in 2277, and arguments otherwise just seem like a massive cope. Seriously, the mental gymnastics surrounding this is insane.
Considering that I'm watching your video, yeah, I kind of agree.
Speaking of Shady Sands, it's also in a new location. I don't know how they managed to fuck this up, but the city is now in the middle of LA, and not only that, but the newly invented Vault 4 is within walking distance of the now destroyed city, as Lucy and Maximus gaze over the Shady Sands crater and walk to a medical facility to get trapped in Vault 4 within the same day. Some people might write this off as pedantic, but this is anything but. Changing the location of Shady Sands has massive implications. In the original Fallout, it was right between Vaults 13 and 15. It was a northern town and relatively secluded. In LA there is the Boneyard. Now Shady Sands is where the Boneyard should be, and this changes everything because Shady Sands would have developed differently if it were all the way in the city. Are Vaults 13 and 15 moved too? Because the Master Chef cracked them open first. It was his entire motivation and goal to get pure humans to turn into his master race of highly intelligent super mutants.
I'm not even gonna humor what he's saying about the Master because, you know, the Master is fucking dead. What he says about the Master is completely irrelevant to the conversation if he no longer exists. But since he's talking about Shady Sands changing its location, he's using the map from Fallout 1. Are we just gonna ignore the fact that Fallout 2 also changed the location of Shady Sands? Fallout 2 depicted Shady Sands and the vaults nearby it further northwest than in Fallout 1. I want to hammer this in because Creetosis likes to paint it like Bethesda are at fault for these retcons, when it's not a Bethesda problem, it's a Fallout problem. Retcons have existed since Fallout 2, even New Vegas is not safe from this either. New Vegas has retcons as well, yet they're never brought into question for breaking the world of Fallout.
This isn't an oversight, this is a massive problem. But now Vault 4 is not only on the back doorstep of Shady Sands, but it's also on the front doorstep of the Master's lair, and it's out in the open, not obscured or hidden at all. In fact, same goes for Vault 33, which is at Santa Monica Pier. So there's 4 new vaults in LA, they're out in the open, and Master just never bothered with them, when it was his whole plan to crack open vaults and turn the residents into super mutants. But he also had a town full of people who came from a vault and used the gek to build their town on his front doorstep, and he just did nothing with any of them when they're all within spitting distance. Further, both in reference to the destruction and new location of Shady Sands, there's multiple references in New Vegas to Shady Sands being a major supply source for the NCR, as it was near the eastern border of California and Nevada, as well as it being where orders from their government were coming from. Quite possibly the biggest retcon is what the whole franchise is about, however.
War. War never changes. War never changes.
War. War never changes.
Bethesda has never understood this line. To them, it's a little more than a cool tagline to the franchise.
Okay, what? Tell me you're trolling. Bethesda has a pretty good understanding of the line "War never changes." The show does a pretty good job at hammering that in, especially in the finale where Hank goes on about factions endlessly fighting for their own reasons. Even Maximus talking about how people want to save the world, they just disagree on how. Fallout 4's opening literally opens up with the sole survivor's great-grandfather in World War II and jumps to the present that is leading up to the Great War. Fallout 4's opening section and the opening of the Fallout TV show is literally about the bombs dropping. I really don't understand how you can be this extremist over this. Like, what did Bethesda do to you?
The reason the world of Fallout is the way it is, the post-apocalypse, is due to the conflict inherent to human nature. Quite ironically, Fallout 3 actually has a pretty good intro talking about this.
Dude, you literally just said that Bethesda doesn't understand the line of "War never changes," yet you simultaneously used Fallout 3 as an example of the line being used properly. And this is literally their first mainline game in the series, no less. You cannot be this stupid.
This show undoes all of that in favor of turning the entire point of the franchise into capitalism banned.
If your main takeaway from this entire show is that the theme is capitalism bad, you have completely and utterly failed to understand what the show was trying to do. The theme of capitalism bad is only in regards to Vault-Tec. Specifically, Vault-Tec. And it makes sense that the theme of capitalism bad would be in regards to Vault-Tec, because they have been known throughout the history of Fallout as the greedy corporate capitalist and giant asshole of a company that had a huge investment in the end of the world. This does not apply to the show in its entirety. It does not apply to every single faction, and it does not apply to every single character. It was only meant for Vault-Tec, because the show stays true to its main theme that you are being willfully ignorant about, and that is, war never changes.
Vault-Tec gathers a few CEOs together to sell them on the idea that to win the game of capitalism, an actual line they use in the show, they need to eliminate the competition, and to do so, they will nuke the entire world. This is Saturday morning cartoon villain logic. No, fuck that, that's an insult to Saturday morning cartoons. This is worse than that. The point of capitalism is to make money. There are both ethical and unethical ways of doing this. In order to make money, you need to offer goods or services. In order to sell your product, you need customers. Potential customers are the entire human population of Earth. Wiping out 99% of humanity is wiping out 99% of your potential customers. Wiping out 99% of humanity is also going to make any currency you have utterly worthless.
Creetosis, listen carefully, alright? That's what the vaults are for. The customers in question are the ones going to the vaults to make entire societies, or to be experimented on. Vault-Tec, from its inception, has always had an investment in the end of the world. It wasn't just about their paper money, it was about having power and influence over others, which is precisely why they took their opportunity of thriving off of the bombs dropping and nuking the world. They made vaults for this scenario. The money wasn't the end goal, it was a means to an end. Their end goal was the end of the world that led to people going in the vaults. Do you understand now?
This is utterly and irredeemably retreaded. This is actual nonsense. This benefits no one, especially not Vault-Tec.
The entire existence of the vaults and all of the experiments that were conducted there would have to disagree with you there. I would say that Vault-Tec pretty much got what they wanted.
All the infrastructure that would be necessary for them to do anything worth a damn with the world. Also, they can eliminate the competition. Also, an utterly inept brain on a fucking Roomba who can be thwarted with a fucking broom. Can be in control of everything.
Hey, that brain on a Roomba is adorable. Leave my brain alone.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
That's because it is. You've got a show made by and for the platform of a multi-billion-dollar company, using the IP of another multi-billion-dollar company, bastardizing a beloved franchise and ruining it, going so far as to change the core theme of the entire series, all to say capitalism bad.
Again, if your only takeaway from the entire show's theme is capitalism bad, you're actually stupid. Once again, that was in regards to Vault-Tec and only Vault-Tec.
In the most stupid way possible, and to make the actual murderous psychopath communist the good guy who gets a heroic death.
When was it ever established that Moldaver was a good guy or a hero? Just because she sacrificed herself to do something noble doesn't mean she's the hero of the story. The whole point is that war never changes. Moldaver is a communist. Capitalism and communism going to war is how the world of Fallout came to be. That's the entire point of the show. Painting Moldaver's death as a hero's death doesn't make sense because she isn't really a hero. She sacrificed herself for something noble, which is getting cold fusion to power the city, but you also don't know that getting cold fusion to power the city is going to benefit anyone yet. It's left ambiguous, especially because the Brotherhood is going to most likely take advantage of cold fusion. Moldaver took a leap of faith knowing that the Brotherhood would overrun the NCR remnants, and activated cold fusion anyways. That's not a hero's death, it's a leap of faith.
Even if new societies rebuild from the vaults, why would they respect your wealth when it's in the form of a currency of a dead nation? Oh wait, Vault-Tec just apparently nukes any society that rises from the ashes of the old world. Why would Vault-Tec equip the vaults with Gex to rebuild in the post-apocalypse if they're just going to nuke them for becoming competition? We're going to nuke the world to kill off the competition, only to save small pockets of humanity and have no contact with them whatsoever, so they can start rebuilding into new competition, so we can nuke them too. Do you understand how completely fucked this is on every level?
How did you take a line of events and then bend them into a fucking circle? What Vault-Tec sees as competition is factions like the NCR. You act like because Vaults are capable of rebuilding societies that they would go against what Vault-Tec wanted. No, they wouldn't. Control Vaults are a thing. They're probably the prime example of Vault-Tec having a lot of power and influence. Why would they nuke their own societies? You make no sense, Cree.
To summarize Vault-Tec's amazing plan, they invited their biggest competitors to a meeting to plan on how to eliminate the competition in order to win the game of capitalism, and to do so they decided to nuke the entire planet, and while doing that, they made vaults so people could survive and gave them technology so they could rebuild in the post-apocalypse and become competition for them to then nuke again.
To be fair, it was never established that Vault-Tec was the one that dropped the nukes. It's left ambiguous as to who dropped the bombs first. We know that Vault-Tec wanted the world to end and that nuking the world was a suggestion, but that doesn't mean they were behind the bombs dropping. That is something that was never revealed.
What the actual fuck is this writing? How did anyone watch this and think it was good? What the fuck is wrong with you people?
So remember when Creetosis said that he doesn't care if people enjoyed the show? Well, looks like he kinda just went back on his word. Remember, you're either a bot or Creetosis lives rent-free in your head if you disagree.
They also dropped the phrase "war never changes" in this show, and it's a fucking marketing catchphrase when selling the CEOs on the idea of nuking the entire world. As a reminder as well, both Mr. House and Frederick Sinclair are not only in this meeting, but are on board with the plan. The former is someone who in the games is established to be totally against the destruction of humanity and tried his best efforts to stop the bombs, and the latter is someone who is a victim of the Big MT's experiments.
Again, neither of those things are true. Mr. House only wanted to save and empower New Vegas with an iron fist, creating his own sort of dictatorship. As for Frederick Sinclair, he's a nutcase that funded the Big MT and literally allowed the experiments in the Sierra Madre to happen. Gee, it's almost like you don't actually understand these characters. Better be careful, Cree. Next thing you know, you're gonna start sounding like you never played any of the games.
But I forgot. He's a rich person, and all rich people are inherently evil, so they can't be victims. That's the level of infantile writing we're dealing with in this stupid show.
This sounds like a straw man argument, because that's not what the show is trying to do, nor have I ever heard anybody in the Fallout community make that kind of defense. This feels like you came up with that on the spot, because I've never heard of people making this defense in regards to the show.
The bombs dropping, the horrible experiments of the vaults, everyone was a victim. Everyone. Not just the poor. The rich weren't protected. You can find Sinclair's storytelling skeleton at the bottom of the Sierra Madre. The show thinks that vaults were for the rich, when most of the vaults were cruel and horrible experiments, where people weren't selected based on class and wealth, but on what would be suitable for said vault experiment.
No, the show does not think the vaults were for the rich. That was in the point of view of Wastelanders. The Wastelanders that Lucy encountered thought the vaults were for the rich. That is not the show saying that. That is a character's point of view. The Wastelanders in the show are most likely completely unaware of the experiments going on within the vaults. I don't know how you can miss that.
This is what the last remaining bit of Fallout worth a damn has been ruined, destroyed, and retconned over. Oh, and the worst part? The show writers have come out and said they nuked Shady Sands because they wanted to keep a post-apocalypse feel to the show. They destroyed the single biggest faction in the franchise and all the storytelling potential it had because they were too fucking stupid to set the show in any part of the USA that hasn't been seen or mentioned in the games at all yet.
The show writers are stupid for progressing the timeline of Fallout to keep the post-apocalyptic feel? Do you just not want the world to change? Do you expect every single installation of Fallout to have the exact same world with nothing drastically changing it? Shady Sands getting nuked doesn't mean the NCR is just gone either. You literally see remnants of the NCR in the fucking show. This would be like the equivalent of bitching about one of the Halo rings or Reach in Halo being destroyed, or complaining about Cadia being destroyed in Warhammer. It's fucking ridiculous. This is just a cope argument because he literally just doesn't want a story or a world to progress.
And I know what some people are going to say, The NCR isn't gone as a faction, they still exist. Fucking where?
They exist in quite a lot of areas, actually. It was explicitly stated in New Vegas that the NCR spreads itself across the US too thin because they're one of the only factions that are trying to form a government. So yes, even with Shady Sands getting nuked, the NCR can still exist. They don't just live unanimously in one single place and are erased from existence after a nuke.
The NCR has been reduced from a superpower, from its own nation, into yet another ghost of the past, into yet more apocalyptic ruins to pick through, in a world full of apocalyptic ruins to pick through.
No, the NCR was never a superpower. They are a powerful faction on paper, but because they spread themselves across the US too thin, they were constantly being bombarded by raider gangs, and they couldn't even stand up to the Legion. The NCR was barely in control of the Mojave. How are they a superpower in the slightest?
Nothing can ever progress, it's just a Wild West wasteland forever until the end of time.
Except it does progress. And yeah, Fallout is a post-apocalyptic western. What else did you expect? Being a Wild West wasteland is the entire appeal of Fallout. Now you're just straight up sounding like a fake fan if you're complaining about the game's appeal. Okay, I know I played your clip for like a split second, but please, edit your voiceovers. You do not need to leave in so much dead air.
There's also been the cope that, oh, Season 2 will explain everything. Just wait. Just let them cook. Why? Why should we?
Because it would piss you off more. I mean, you are a New Vegas extremist, so no matter what they do with the show, you'll overly analyze it anyways and magically create a problem.
There's nothing wrong with leaving some questions open to be answered in the future, but there's just so much to the show that is vague and entirely unanswered that shouldn't be. Half the season was useless filler that could have been used to explain things to us.
Okay, no, you really didn't understand the show. How in the fuck was there any filler? Every single episode had something of importance in regards to the plot. If you guys want more context, the most damning example of Creetosis saying the show has filler is episode 4, which is not a filler episode like he claims it is. Episode 4 is the hero's journey, where Lucy is the oblivious vault dweller who is trying to adapt to the wasteland. She's sold off by the ghoul and almost got fucking killed and dissected by a Mr. Handy, and she quickly learns about ghouls in the wasteland. Episode 4 is also where you find out that Moldaver got access into Lucy's vault through her mother's Pip-Boy. How is this a filler episode? It is anything but. You are really making shit up about this show to paint it in a bad light. This is the textbook definition of bad faith.
They didn't even explain how Moldaver survived for 220 years, and now she's dead.
There are already possible scenarios as to how she lived for that long, cryogenic stasis being one of them, and also the most likely. I mean, that's how the sole survivor lived for so long in Fallout 4. It's not outside the realm of possibility that Moldaver was also in cryogenic stasis.
But fear not, everyone. God Howard has come out and said nothing has been retconned. Everything is canon. There's no problem and there's nothing wrong. So Graham and Geneva want to blow up Shady Sands. The first time they bring that up, you're like, what do you want to do? I actually had an emotional reaction to it given the history of that location in the franchise from Fallout 1, and we talked through it, and it was, this will be a pretty impactful story moment that a lot of things anchor on. And just so people hear it, we're careful about the timeline. There might be a little bit of confusion at some places, but everything that happened in the previous games, including New Vegas, happened. We're very careful about that. And so when they brought that up, threading that needle to make sure that was a moment that landed in the show, that also moved things forward in terms of what's going to be happening in the world of Fallout. That was a big one we talked about. I was actually specifically going to ask you about that Shady Sands timeline conversation, and you say that nothing in New Vegas is retconned. I think the rub, to kind of TLDR it, is that the fall of Shady Sands happens at 2277, which is 4 years before New Vegas. So are people just misunderstanding what the fall of Shady Sands means or something like that? All I can say is, we're threading it tighter there, but the bombs fall just after the events of New Vegas. That's when Shady Sands blows. Thank you, Todd. I'll make sure to sacrifice my firstborn child in your name.
Dude, this is literally confirmation from Todd that the nuke didn't happen in 2277. Why are you still taking this in bad faith? Like, can Todd Howard just not win here?
Except there's some problems with this. A lot, in fact. To get the threading the needle part out of the way, you wouldn't need to do that if you didn't set the destruction of Shady Sands so close to the events of New Vegas. Wait, fuck that noise. You wouldn't need to do that if you didn't nuke Shady Sands before New Vegas, then have to do damage control because you fucked up like you always do.
He literally clarified that New Vegas wasn't retconned in the show and that the nuke didn't happen in the year that would arguably cause an even bigger inconsistency in Fallout's timeline. Why are you taking this in bad faith and saying he royally fucked up? If Todd said that the nuke happened in 2277, people would bitch even more because the nuke happens before the events of New Vegas. But because he said the opposite, you're now accusing him of committing damage control. That is cope. You literally go around saying that everybody else is coping while they defend the show, but because Todd Howard actually went out of his way to clarify and say that New Vegas was not retconned and that the nuke happened after New Vegas, you start coping even harder and say he's damage controlling. It's almost like you've been projecting this entire time.
Because you don't give a shit about the lore unless it's something you can market. Why would you put the fall of Shady Sands as an event if it wasn't the destruction?
Wow, Creetosis, I really truly wonder why he would do that. It's almost like you glossed over this tiny detail in the article you were reading. So basically, the fall of Shady Sands doesn't mean a nuke necessarily. Correct. Now with that in mind, when it comes to the fall of Shady Sands, if this was an event in the timeline, if it wasn't the destruction of the city, then it must mean that the city was in a decline at some point. The fall of a city or an empire doesn't automatically mean the destruction, because a fall happens in a period of time. The destruction of a city or empire is when the city has fallen. It's actually incredibly disingenuous to gloss over that detail in the article and then paint it as Todd Howard committing damage control when that's not what he's doing.
Because now we have an extra event on the timeline that we have no context or reference for what it is or what happened there. Every previous event on the timeline references something in the games. The fall of Shady Sands is new lore, and it's just this vague nebulous nothingness that's just there randomly before the town gets entirely destroyed. It's pretty clear that they fucked up massively and are playing damage control.
Actually, it's pretty clear that you just hate everything Bethesda does and are just coping that people actually like a piece of media that Bethesda was involved in. Because the moment confusion arises in regards to it and Todd Howard provides some clarification in order to make something make more sense, you accuse them of damage control, which is retarded. Because again, if Todd Howard confirmed that the nuke happened in 2277, you would 1000% use it against him anyways. Dude, who would have known that a chalkboard drawing of a mushroom cloud could cause this much of a fucking stir from these degenerates?
But worse yet, Todd is saying this shit as though they have any credibility at this point. They're paying close attention to the timeline, he says, when the very first frame of this entire show fucks up the timeline. Absolute best case scenario, most benefit of the doubt I could give the show, this birthday party is at 10 AM. But this is in California. On the East Coast, it would be 1 PM at that same time, due to how time zones work. Fallout 3 and 4 confirm that the bombs dropped in the morning, 9:47 AM, which would be 6:47 AM in California.
This is probably the best point that Creetosis makes in regards to what the show did wrong. But here's the thing. This isn't a retcon, this is just an inconsistency. There's a difference between the two terms. Plus, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief to be had because of how wonderfully executed the opening of the show was. I think, despite the fact that there is an inconsistency in the show based on when the bombs dropped, it's still a good opening, especially because newer people getting into Fallout will immediately understand what this world is about. It's an opening that can intrigue people that are starting to get into the series. So yes, the time that the bombs dropped in the show is an inconsistency, but really, it's kind of up to the viewer of how much significance this inconsistency has.
Like, I can't stress this enough. Todd, the man that even big fans of Bethesda meme on for lying, the man who said Fallout 3 has 200 endings, is telling us they're paying close attention to the timeline in a show where they screw up the timeline from the outset.
Okay, this isn't even about retcons anymore. This is the part of the video where it becomes an anti-Bethesda rant. Like, we get it, bruh. Bethesda and Todd Howard have made bad decisions, but we're not talking about video games here. We're talking about a TV show. Something that was actually well written for once that Bethesda should be given credit for.
Todd is telling us to trust them, and that they're paying attention when Shady Sands is in a completely different location from where it is in the games, which is a massive fuck-up that should not be possible. Todd is telling us to trust them when they added in 4 vaults that are out in the open and not hidden at all to the LA area, where the master absolutely would have cracked them and taken all the residents within. There's a 0% chance he'd miss them or fail to open them, and yet these vaults are entirely unmolested. And this is from a company that has never respected the source material. That's always just done whatever the fuck they want and make massive changes to factions, characters, lore, and the world all on a whim. This is from a company that said they won't be beholden to something someone wrote 20 years ago. This is from a company that's written off genuine concerning criticism for the integrity of the lore as being unimportant because it's a silly world with talking ghouls and mutants. This is from the company that changes the Brotherhood to something different every fucking time we see them.
The Brotherhood is different every time you see them because the Brotherhood has chapters. All of these different regiments in the Brotherhood operate in different ways. The Brotherhood is different with a lot of these iterations in the series because they are different. They are different chapters. Brotherhood of Steel is not one giant unified faction, they are heavily splintered into different groups. I like how you're taking something that has a very simple explanation and are trying to use that against Todd and Bethesda. This would be like the equivalent of bitching about why all of the different Space Marine chapters in Warhammer are just completely different from one another. It's retarded.
This is from the company that plays so fast and loose with the lore of their IPs that when they made Morrowind, they had to invent a plot element called a Dragon Break to explain how all the endings from Daggerfall were canon, and when ML was writing the Dark Brotherhood for Oblivion, he changed them entirely from a regular Assassin's Guild into a full-on religious death cult just because he wanted to. The Night Mother is an Imperial bitch you kill in Morrowind, only for Oblivion to claim she's an ancient ghost that's been guiding the Dark Brotherhood for centuries.
I really don't feel like humoring this rant further by responding to this tangent, especially because Elder Scrolls is irrelevant to this conversation because we're supposed to be talking about Fallout, but fuck it, I'll humor this point. It doesn't really make sense that you're using the Night Mother as an example of an inconsistency or a retcon in Bethesda's track record. You're just nitpicking the way they wrote her. You also word it like the Night Mother's spirit is ancient, even though the time skip between Morrowind and Oblivion is about 6 years. Unless you show a piece of dialogue or a piece of lore that states that the Night Mother's spirit is ancient, I'm just gonna call you out on your bullshit. In regards to the Dark Brotherhood becoming a death cult, from the way you worded it, that just sounds like they wanted to flesh them out other than being another generic Assassin's Guild like you were suggesting they were in Morrowind. It also makes sense that after you kill the Night Mother, she would become that spirit and influence the Dark Brotherhood. Like, that's not a bad explanation as to why the Dark Brotherhood changed that way. Now, in regards to the Dragon Break, they made it after Daggerfall due to the different endings. Leaving the story of an RPG ambiguous makes it more impactful because it makes the player feel like whatever choice they made in Daggerfall actually feel like it happened. The Dragon Break is there because it gives all of the different endings an actual impact. Dark Souls had a similar idea as well, before From Software was even planning on making sequels. I really don't see the problem with the Dragon Break, as I think it's an interesting approach when it comes to giving all of the different endings an impact. I think you're just bitching for the sake of bitching.
This is a company that wants us to trust they won't fuck up the lore of a franchise, where they've only ever fucked up the lore every single time they've touched it. And we're supposed to trust them now, that they totally didn't fuck it up this time too? Just how many chances are we supposed to give Bethesda before people start caring? Or is it too late?
Okay, at this point, this video has just completely transitioned from a video talking about retcons to an anti-Bethesda rant. Like, Jesus Christ, he really hates Bethesda. So instead of responding to anything he says at this point, here's a compilation of Creetosis being a complete and utter spurg. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Creetosis.
Has Bethesda successfully supplanted the real Fallout with their bootleg knockoff that shares none of the core substance or meaning? After I finished watching the show, I went back and played Fallout 1 again, and it is goddamn unrecognizable from what Bethesda has mutated the franchise into. It has become a parody of itself. At the end of my analysis of Fallout 4, I referenced The Thing, how it infects and replaces people, and can look like them and imitate them, but underneath it's a completely different beast. I feel that's an appropriate metaphor to use again to describe what has been done to this franchise. Fallout is dead and gone, and has been replaced by an imposter, a fake that uses its name and iconography, while ruining, undoing, and shitting all over established lore, all for the sake of making sure the franchise will be nothing more than a perpetual goofy post-apocalypse theme park, where nothing ever advances or progresses, and the only faction that matters is the fucking Brotherhood of Steel. And as someone who loves Fallout, that is very fucking depressing to see. And on that note, fuck every single big Fallout YouTuber and lore master giving this shit a pass, and excusing this with little to no critical thinking, or who smother any critical thought in the crib, so as not to upset Daddy Todd. I'm sick to fucking death that the future of this franchise is doomed to be a poorly written generic apocalypse theme park shooting gallery with dumb bullshit jokes and references that constantly shits on established lore because Bethesda doesn't give a fuck, and because the majority of the people who talk about these games and could collectively make a difference for the better of the franchise through criticizing its failings are either mindless consumers looking for the next content high, people who invest too much of their personality or self-worth into a franchise to say anything bad about it and treat any criticism of it as though it's an attack on themselves, or actual self-serving charlatans whose meal tickets rely on them being overbearingly positive about every bowel movement Bethesda has, so they don't lose access, or so they can gain access in the first place. Fuck all of these people. You have people out here making excuse after excuse after excuse for this shit for everything Bethesda has done. Jim says being in a completely different location is just a minor oversight. All the absurd coincidences are just everyone's luck stat at 10. It's just like the games. Hardly anyone tries to hold Bethesda to account. This goes for everything Bethesda has done. Brotherhood is entirely different in Fallout 3? Well, it's been several years and we're on the other side of the country, so it's fine they've completely changed. Bethesda has turned a group of isolationist technophiles who hated outsiders into saviors who want to help the wasteland. From that into a diet enclave that want to destroy all mutants, even the good ones, and worse yet destroy valuable technology they can make use of. They've inserted their OC into pre-war era to make the original Brotherhood do something they never would. And with this show, they turn them into a full-on religious extremist cult complete with actual branding, and where Squire seem to have an expectation to be killed for no reason by the knights they serve. And this is all excused by the passage of time between games, and different chapters act in different ways. The Brotherhood are just a fucking mystery box now. They can be anything the writers feel they want to do for the next entry, with no real adherence to what they were before, and no one gives a shit. Time after time after time. It's all excuses and whataboutism and other fallacies. Anything to avoid criticizing Bethesda. They've said they won't be beholden to something someone wrote 20 years ago. They've said they let the writers do pretty much whatever they want. They said they don't think much of the franchise, because it's a silly, stupid world. And yet you have people acting as though Bethesda can do no wrong. As though they have any respect for the franchise, or they try to shame you into silence. Bring up Kid in the Fridge retconning ghouls needing water, and they'll bring up Coffin Willie. As though a joke character who's buried alive for an amount of time we do not know, but is implied to be recent, is any way comparable to Kid in the Fridge surviving for over 200 years without food and water. Bethesda can do anything and get away with it, because they have a loyal horde of fans and influencers who will shout down or shame people into silence, or they'll bring up obscure Easter eggs as though serious lore to shut you up, or they'll play disingenuous whataboutism games, such as pointing to a Joker Easter egg in the originals, to justify the actual clown show this franchise has turned into. In fact, that's another thing in particular I'm fucking sick of. This historical revisionism bullshit regarding the original games is fucking insane. You have assholes like Norte pointing out that there's a talking Brahmin in the original Fallout, which is an extremely rare encounter Easter egg that is so rare to the point that rather than finding this encounter for himself, he took the Fallout wiki entry image and used that in his video, and he uses that to justify that Fallout has always been silly and absurd, and that a darker and grounded Fallout wouldn't be Fallout. Motherfucker, have you played the original Fallout games? A darker, deadpan, grounded Fallout game wouldn't be Fallout. Yeah, it was definitely 1,000 laughs a minute. I'm busting a fucking gut here at how wacky and silly and unserious it is. That an entire society of people died from a lack of water, or that a 17-year-old kid got murdered by a druggie. These are games that feature two antagonists intent on genocide, kidnappings, murders, people being turned into horrible mutants against their will, entire families, including children, being killed. If you play female characters with low intelligence in Fallout 2, your character could be drugged and raped by Myron, who's a 16 or 17-year-old kid. He even claims that it's not grounded to have the master reveal his villain plan, but it actually makes sense for the master to reveal his plan, because he's egotistical, he thinks his plan can't be stopped, and he's trying to convince you to join him. The historical revisionism on the original Fallout games is so bad that anyone new to the series would think it's always been an absurd, unserious cartoon funland. And the reality is that the jokes are pretty restrained and rare in the original. Fallout 2 had a lot of good place Easter eggs that were mostly defined random encounters, was an otherwise serious game, and the series has been flanderized to shit. This would be like Game of Thrones having the odd joke here and there, or justification to change the series to be like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Occasionally a joke will moment in a dark, grim, depressing world where people are barely surviving does not turn into a wacky, goofy, absurd comedy clown show. This is a fandom dominated by shills and consumers, and Fallout is heading at record pace as bad as Star Wars has gotten. And if you say anything bad about these games or the show, they try to shame you into silence. The gaslighting on this is fucking insane. Mention that Fallout isn't serious anymore, and you got fucking horde people coming at you saying shit like Fallout was never serious. People who think Fallout is all serious never played the game. It was always silliness, making some really real moments. We never had a serious story told in the Fallout setting, but you never played a Fallout game before if you think the setting is generally serious. We've had people downplaying elements of the original games as if they were stupid jokes back then too, and they never were. I genuinely don't know how much of this people were misinformed due to big Fallout YouTubers criticizing the games. Nor do I know how much of this people who invested in this franchise were allowed to be criticized, so they won't interfere anytime someone criticizes it. People are acting as though this is a comedy series with 20 jokes per minute when it never was. In fact, the comment that Fallout was probably silly with some serious moments mixed in is the total reverse of what it actually was. Fallout 1 was like 90% serious and 10% silly. This is how flanderization happens. I talked about this in Saints Row as well. You have a game that's mostly serious with the odd joke references here and there, and several games later, it's just a wacky, goofy cartoon funland where hardly anything is treated seriously, and you're an idiot and a loser for thinking the franchise is ever serious. A good example of this kind of thing happening in Fallout itself with the aliens. Criticized much of Zeta for making aliens canon and heavily implying they started the war. People come at you telling you that aliens have been part of the series since the original, while failing to mention that aliens in the original were never Easter egg, like the fucking Brahmin I mentioned earlier. If the fact one of them has a portrait of Elvis in inventory isn't enough against, but this is meant as a joke, examine the flying saucer itself, the label that says property of Area 51, return and found. The creed, music itself is a joke. That's proof that the franchise is always silly and stupid. No, shut the fuck up. Somebody gave us completely differentiate between something having some jokes in it and something being comedy. I'm sick of being used as an excuse for following the clown world when nothing matters. People are using rare and obscure Easter eggs to excuse massive ridiculous war changes to this franchise, as well as excusing their franchise being flanderized to hell and turned into a complete joke. As a result, nothing matters because everything is just one big joke, despite the fact that even the Bethesda games and the show try to have serious storytelling. In fact, there's a point that Fallout has never been serious. We call the amazing stuff in Fallout 3. We call the W life in Fallout 4. We call the urgency activated purifier in Fallout 3. And the self-sacrifice lone wanderer forced to make. We call your blind son's last word in Fallout 4. Even just looking at the Bethesda games, there's a lot of examples of serious storytelling, even if the story's well written. People who say Fallout is never serious, it's fucking yours. They don't know what the fuck are talking about. Regardless, modern Fallout is recognizable no less originally. Almost exclusively Bethesda doing whatever they want in the war, and they have zero respect for these games. We have people playing these games as an example of how silly stupid this world is and how it should be taken seriously. These people seem to not only their justification for thinking this thing, but straight totally constantly not a joke. I'm kind of retarded. What across the joke, they're else person is. But it makes sense in the world, based on the lore given. They started being more tool, because else some people worship strike anyway, so they bring it up. I'm not just a whole. I should get treated like a joke by the game. Anyone who interacts with the question knows this. See, that's what makes fiction. You can't do your things have not be a joke. I'm not going to joke. You have characters with powers. You have characters with weird. The work is all by it's genuine. It doesn't have mindself treating the world so stupid. Case in point, nothing of the description of the part of actually here. You're not supposed to be one of the real moments. All the undermine, funny joke 3 seconds later. There may also be some online. Why do you mention often? This particular one's competition fallacy. That is, taking small part of something, between characters that's all part of the whole. For example, video games Superman suits yellow. If you have some funny moments, or a few jokes, or references, it's not turning into a comedy. It did. And every franchise ever made, which is turning into a comedy. Keep in mind, that's before we even have something called humor in the show. When Bethesda games, people criticize the show because talking based constantly. That's what it is to shame and fucking defense. But that's kind of toxic. Criticizing the Fallout, in general, and it's fucking rabid. But remember, this is a big fan of talking based on They call it writing. Simple character consistency. He's trying to shake down people. He's not to not taking fiction. And negative content for hours. They don't want to think of something else. Or why they're trying to be better. Or something you're shaming the fan. People think it's a menu. This is making sense. People think it's you can have the franchise. The franchise. First off, you can call it you move from Mandarin. If I call it you move from Mandarin. People don't pockets. Also, the thing is the pockets. I would sacrifice New Vegas in a heartbeat if it meant Bethesda didn't have free reign to butcher this franchise as they have for the last 15 years. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe.
That was funny. All of that was just funny. Like, I'm not even joking you. That entire section that I just made a funny edit out of was just an anti-Bethesda rant. Probably one of my favorite parts of his Spurg session is when he said that the Fallout fandom is packed to the brim with shills and consumers. Like, holy shit, dude. He is actually, like, insane and coping so hard that people like a show. But anyways, with that compilation out of the way, that is gonna do it for this absolutely horrendous analysis and critique of the Fallout TV show. I actually think Creetosis is quite the character, because you see, this isn't the only video that I found a lot of red flags on. His entire marathon of episode reactions for the Fallout TV show are actually horrendous, as they feel the need to nitpick and dissect every minute detail in the show for absolutely no reason, other than the fact that everybody involved went in with the preconceived notion that the show was going to be bad. While I was doing research for this video, I couldn't help but cringe massively from the reactions, even when I'm not even watching the entire thing. So, if I ever feel the need to, or if my viewers really want me to, I can cover more about this stuff, because trust me, there's a lot to unpack with what he's criticized the show for. But until then, I am going to end off the video here, as I feel like this has gone for long enough. I hope you all enjoyed my response to Creetosis, and if you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Until then, see you later, friends.